Oh my god. It's so hot.
Welcome to the Insights of the Daily Dose Plus, a space for open and thought-provoking discussions. Here we want to talk about trends from politics, policy, reforms, technology, innovation, and beyond. Today we're very excited to be here with our special guest at our very first episode titled National Development and Inclusive Dialogue. Yes, it's okay. I saw you do your hand like this.
No, it's good. You were looking at this camera. I was pointing out to that. It's just a conversation.
Okay.
So
Yes.
no,
We just continue. So to start off with, let's introduce the guests. We have Mohammed Esba here, who is a media specialist and also the former president of the Gambian Press Union. And he's also someone that we all know. We've all worked with MS Ba to some extent. He's a very passionate Gambian who is dedicated to seeing development in our country. We're very grateful to have you here today. We also have Negen Job, Madam Speaker of the NYP, the National Youth Parliament. Negen is currently also working with the Center for Policy and Research, and she's an advocacy officer there. We thank you very much for coming with us here today.
Thank you for having me.
We have Kemo Bojang, who is a councillor at the Kanifing Municipal Council, yes. We have Kemo Bojang, who is a youth councillor at Kanifing Municipal Council, and he's also a representative of the UDP party. We're very grateful to have you here and the good work that you're doing for young people, especially when it comes to including us in the political discourse. So thank you very much for being here. We're done with that part of the segment, the introductions. Let's dive into the conversations. I just want us to get into it and just have a very casual conversation about how we see development. So I'll start off with you, and again, what does national development mean for you?
Thank you very much, Aisha, and I'm very glad to be here again. National development, when you speak of national development, ideally it reflects back to its pillars. You talk about political development, social development, economic development, and all that. And how I understand it, and I always want to come back home when I talk about this concept. It's about, as a country, it's about reflecting how far we have come as a country politically in our political developments, looking at our political history, which is very interesting, which I always love talking about. And I'm not an economic expert, but also economically, how have we come and how have our political aspects actually affect our economic development, and how has that translated to the social lives of people when it comes to human capital development and other social issues as a country. So basically, national development is about how greater pillars of our political architecture affects the lives of citizens daily. That's how I will analyze it if I am to speak about national development.
And I think that's a very fair analysis, and it speaks also to how the conversation will go today. A lot of the work that we're doing across the different sectors that we live in intersect, and we'll definitely get more into that. Kemo, how do you view national development with the seats that you sit in?
I want to say a big thank you once more for inviting me here. And just to piggyback on what Degen has said, definitely my position is also dividing it into three. You've got the social, political, and economic, or socio-political. And she has made mention of something very important, that how far have we come as a country. In 1962, when we set out to vote in a referendum to usher in a new state called the Gambia, what was our psyche like, and what was our position as a country and as a people generally, and how far did we want to come? And when you consider where we are today, you look at the social settings we've had, you look at our economic and political settings, you'll see that yes, to some extent we have moved forward, but was this what we were set out to do? And I believe that, and I like to say this, it's not just Gambia, but position-wise, my disagreement with most post-colonial African leaders is that we, in as much as we had a plan, but we never really built nation states, in my opinion. And when you look at post-independence Africa, the only countries that really had an idea of what they wanted to do or had a local or a traditional political or social system, where countries like Burkina Faso under Sankara, or you talk about countries like Tanzania under Nyerere, with Ujamaa, for example. And we could have done more, but we are also grateful for how far we've come. And in general perspective, national development for me is how far have we come as a people, and how has the well-being of the citizens of a country developed over time. For me, that is what national, because I'm like Rostov has said, you can have an increase in GDP, but if it doesn't reflect on the lives of the people, how far have you really come as a developed country? And for me, it's about have we improved the welfare of the Gambian citizens, or generally the people that live in our countries.
Excellent points that you bring up there, Kemo. Thank you for that. And then MS Ba, we go to you. How do you view national development?
Yeah, I think they've said it all, at that elitist perspective. For me, locally, how do you view national development is how people are living, whether they are living a dignified life, whether they are living a meaningful life, whether they are achieving their daily meals and nutritional diets are supposed to, and whether they are also participating in the development of the country, whether their voice are heard, that is, to me, that is what national development is, and also whether they are accessing basic health and education, and whether that country also is not depending more on outside, like, for example, as little as onions, as little as cucumbers and tomatoes are coming into our country. Is that national development, whether our staple food is being provided by us, whether we can feed ourselves, So national development, as they rightly stated, it has economic consequences if you look at the economic perspective, whether people are feeling it, because mostly what people will tell you, you hear a lot of loans, grants, a lot of projects, but is it filtering down? And if you're walking across, or you're going to the rural area, you see a lot of boards like community resilient project, poverty reduction. But you go into those communities and you wonder, wow, where are these projects going? So national development is having people feeling, being part of a country where they can feed themselves, where they can access health, where their voices are heard, like politically. It's not only just voting or participating in elections, is far beyond that. Whether if I speak, I will not be arrested by the IGP for just merely stating my mind as a dignified citizen of a country. Whether I will also benefit. We've seen the Masembe, by elections. We've seen a post. That perspective subconsciously, that is what have been happening in our communities, not only with Kiang, that if you do not vote for me, we are not giving you development. Whether we have that mindset. And another thing that I always, advocate for is, Gambia, we are very good in having plans, but do we have like a general vision, like a 50 years vision? We've seen Jawara had that vision, but that was just a short-term vision. For example, he was pegging it at being a Singapore sort of like country. But what does it mean? So every person in terms of development, also the mindset, where the Gambian mindset is also developed to understand who are we. Kemo rightly stated. that in 1962, whether when we were crafting and whether this thing is ongoing in our minds. So it's important, and our behavior, our attitude towards national development. So basically, this is what I believe. It's national.
Yeah, great. I think you all bring very good points, and it's really a moment of reflection for us all as a nation, being that this year we turned 60, and looking at what has got us to this point and what we've done with it and where we want to go. One thing that really speaks to national development from what you've all have said is that national development reflects the state of the people, the state of the nation, right? So whether it's coming from the perspective of someone that's in the local council or in the media, in civil society, it all speaks to how the people are. And you've said something very important about a plan. What is the plan for our nation? We've had leaders who have come with plans. We've had the NDP that we currently have 2023 to 2027. During Jammeh's time, we had the Vision 2020, I believe it was. So we've had these plans, but why is it that we've not been able to execute them? Because when you look at the Gambia, we're very good at writing documents and having good plans, but it's the enforcement. So the question is, are we not able to enforce them because those plans do not reflect our current realities and we do not have the capacity to implement them? Or what are the gaps in the fact that, or what are the gaps that we see to the fact that we cannot implement what we write, we cannot implement what we speak or what we preach? Because we've seen these conversations haven't happened for many years. And unfortunately, a lot of folks in the discourse are saying that, you know, with our country, we're seeing the same cycle and the same thing happening again and again. And we know what Einstein says. He says, if you do the same thing again and again and you expect a different result, you're insane. So are we in that state of insanity? And I mean, a lot of us play a key role in making sure that the public is informed, as you do, and I think we all play a role within that. But what is that gap? Why is it that we as a nation do not have resilience? So resilience is key, because sustainability and resilience are two very different things. Resilience allows us to be proactive and not reactive towards turmoil. We've talked about the external dependence that we have, civil society, and the country at large will also feel the impacts of the current foreign aid shifts in US and in Europe and also other continents. So I want to hear from you guys. What are the gaps? Why are we not getting there?
Okay. You want to go first?
Thank you, Kemo. On one part, as a person who sits in policy-making rooms on behalf of young people, a lot of times we are pessimists. We have good policies. We have good plans in this country, but we are very pessimist when it comes to their implementation. When the NDP, was it the 2020?
That's the Euro one, huh?
Yes, no, before the Euro.
Right. The NDP,
The National Development Plan, when we were reviewing it and to develop the Euro, I was one of the people representing the young people during the review, and you looked at how we were, the review was planned. It tells you a lot about why weren't we even able to implement the NDP to a certain extent? I'll give you an example. We were talking about the specifics. We were talking about, okay, over the last 5 years, how many youth centers have been built in this country? And, people started counting youth center structures that we started building, but that, those that are not completed. And my argument was, no, we are not counting it. We are counting youth centers that are built and young people are using it. Those are just buildings. They're not youth centers for now. And, we argue back and forth, because for me, the perspective is, if we started counting incomplete buildings as youth centers, they might be there the next 10 years. The Euro will come and go, and we'll still have those buildings and be counting them as youth centers, and young people will go without youth centers. So we tick the boxes for the bare minimum when it comes to the implementation of our plans and policies, and not what can we do, what is the maximum that this policy can yield for us as a country. That should be our target. And that's one problem. And you hear a lot of people who say, we did really good with the NDP and all that, but go into the specifics. And you looked at, when it comes to human capital development, how far have we gone? And you look at education, you look at youth development, especially when it comes to skills. Yes, every day you hear new inauguration, new this, new, but how far have we really gone? How many young people have acquired skills that they are using to actually gain livelihood? For me, that is the question. It's not only about training, okay, we have trained 100 young people to get skills. No. After training them, how many of them are using those skills to acquire livelihood, to ensure that they contribute to the economy? So our policies have always been, you know, how will I call it, recording the bare minimum. Okay, we have done this, but not actually the yield, not actually measuring the result. And that is why always we see ourselves doing things, but we're not seeing results.
You bring in a very important point in terms of how are we representing the impact of the activities or the initiatives that we have, right? The outcome, the impact, but also in the long term, and how resilient is it actually making our people? We've all seen that there are many trainings and capacity building from, you know, women that are farming. We have capacity building for young people, but what is it that they can benefit from with those skills if there's not an infrastructure in place in which they can make those skills marketable? So you're making a very good point there. Kemo, do you want to add on that?
Oh, can you repeat the question, please?
The question?
Yes. What are you asking?
No, just from what you wanted to speak before.
Yes,
so yeah,
yes.
just to add
Okay,
on
okay.
to the point.
So
yes.
for me, my position is that it's not that we don't have the capacity to implement these projects or these plans we have. And like I mentioned from the beginning, it's always important to put context into discussions, and especially when it comes to national discussions. How many of us take ownership when it comes to policies in this country? And is governance a citizens-led position? And for example, are we really included in the governance process, you know, of this country? When the NDP was first developed, and even before the NDP, let's talk about the 5-year development plan that President Jawara had, and then you talk about the Vision 2020, and then now you talk about the NDP. How have citizens really taken ownership of these projects? Because are they included in its process? And for example, it's one thing to bring policymakers, it's one thing to bring people with technical know-how into a room, tell them to look at a position and give you a position paper, but the people that it's being implemented for and the people that are supposed to benefit from these policies, how much are they taking ownership of it? And this is why I keep asking people questions. What does it mean to be Gambian, for example? And really, none of us can really tell you how unique it is to become Gambian. Because if it's about geography, it's the same geography that Senegalese can also say that this is why I'm Senegalese. If it's about cultures, it's the same cultures we share with different people. But what does Gambia mean to you, and how are we, included in these processes that we're taking? And secondly, also, like I keep saying, until we're able to build nation states that reflect the daily lives of our people and reflect our cultures and traditions, because I am a huge advocate of traditional political systems, it will be difficult for us to be able to make progress. That's one. Two, another point is that when we talk about these these plans we have, very little advocacy or very little advertisements go into them. If a few things that we do is you see advertisements on TV talk about the NDP most of the time in English. As a people, how many of our citizens are able to understand these things and know the crux of the matters of the things they're dealing with? So it's a multifaceted position, it's a multifaceted issue that we have to look at. But I like to use China as an example. When Chairman Mao came with the progress ideology of China, what he did is that he made it a citizen-centered development. It was difficult in the beginning, but everybody caught up with it. And today, China, in as much as it's not an example for for democracy, but it's an example for progress. And like it or not, we have to acknowledge how far they've come as a country. And we have seen what it means if citizens take ownership and if citizens are ready to work with their government. Granted, one can say that it's a one-party state, but we have seen that the plan has worked. So as a people, we must also indigenize our governance processes, our economic processes, and use our social settings to push the idea of centering the people that really matter in development. But if we continue to live on the idea that, okay, the government is there, the people are here, there's always going to be a gap that will be really difficult to fill. And this is why we are faced with the problem.
I just want to comment real quickly before you do. But I
just want to add on to what he's...
Okay.
Okay. I agree with you. Why are we not... what is the gaps? The gaps are there. Like, I agree with Kemo, obviously. looking at our institutional framework, I think it's failing us since colonial era to now. Even look at the local councils; they are not empowered. That's the problem. So how can we revisit our local governance system, and how can it has a connection to the central governance system? And mostly it's like us versus them.
Yes.
That is why development is not working. And this is the reality. If you look at the local councils, sometimes they will tell you they want to do certain development agendas. But because of that political connotation, the central government will be like, oh, no, we have to delay this. And the political will aspect of it is one aspect of it. So now how can we make sure that, for me, I believe our local governance structure system should be looked at and should be revised. And how can they work with the central government to really administer development to every doorstep in this country? Because the local government, why do we have a local government? Is it serving its purpose? What are the gaps? That is what we have to ask. For example, look at the policing aspect of it. The IGP was saying they have gaps in terms of implementation. My friend, the local council is here. They have a police. Why can't we synergize, put a synergy with security? Even this robbery and stuff, addressing issues. Why should we just centralize things? That is why you hear robbery here today, police will arrest these people, and you hear Kergalo having robbery again. They arrest those people, and you have fast Njagachoy. Because the local governance structure is not at the helm of affairs. They should be there. So for me, having local government, okay, you are local and you are central, that idea should be looked at. There should be a synergy. Security-wise, economic empowerment, electricity, even the network. There should be a system that should be coordinated even at the local government system. Even at the GBOS level, these census we're having, it should be replicated to the local governments. There should be structures to know that, okay, for example, if someone migrate from Bakau to Talinding, then how do we know that now we have, instead of 500 people living here, now we have 600? You understand? How do you capture that data? It is the problem. That's the problem now. And another issue in terms of our development, he made mention of it, the approach. Like, we are not using the human rights-based approach. What we do is we craft, and we elitize everything. Like, everything we do, you go to a workshop, you validate it, finish. Yeah, you have a development plan. Even some of us, if you ask people what are the critical enabler of the Euro, they don't know. What are some of the priority areas of the Euro? They don't know. What were the critical enabler of the NDP? They will not know. And this is the fact. So now, how can we ensure that whatever plan we develop, it is a national stuff that should be even embedded at our local level, not only the local, even in schools. Students, or a child of maybe 5 years or 10 years can tell you, when you ask the person, okay, who are you as a Gambian? He can tell you. And then, what is the master plan of Gambia? He will tell you, this is Gambia, this is what we want to have in the Gambia in the next 20, 40, 50 years.
You all bring up very good points when it comes to this, and what you're all saying intersects. I will take one of Kemo's points, which is the first one, the point of national identity. What are we as a nation, right? Once you have a national identity, and you have countries that have done it quite well. You've mentioned China, Brazil is a country that's reinvented themselves, Rwanda. We have many countries within even our sub-region. You can even look at Ghana, you can look at Nigeria. They have a very strong national identity. And maybe that's something in our nation that's a bit vague. You bring up an important point of synergy and alignment. Unfortunately, a lot of our laws and legislations are not in alignment. And then it becomes very difficult to understand who is in charge of what. We look at the Local Government Act of 2002, that was revised in 2019. It is not necessarily in alignment with some of the NRA acts. We look at simple things such as who is in charge of
the road
authorities,
Yeah,
right?
you know.
Local infrastructure, who is in charge of the feeder roads, the local government access, that is the municipalities, it's the local council, but NRA access, that NRA are the ones in charge. So these are some of the issues that we
Even
face as a
payment of
nation.
street lights, for example.
Yes, yes. And I think that to give ourselves some grace, to give our nation some grace and our country and ourselves as Gambians, we need to take context into consideration. The Gambia really, for the past, we've been independent for 60 years, but have we truly, really been independent as democratic as we are today, right? We've never had access to the information we have, to the freedom of speech we have today, to the civil society that we're seeing today, and I would even argue to an extent the engagement that we're seeing from the public. And it's very recent, it's been 10 years. However, that does also not take away the fact that we could have done a lot more given the capacity that we have as a nation. But what are some of the things that you guys can do in your respective roles? What are some of the things that you are doing, especially with civil society, especially with the media? We have the access to information law. I would love for you to speak on that because it's very pivotal when it comes to local municipalities, the average citizen like myself, and other medias to really get an understanding of what's happening in our country. Does the government have a cohesive communication plan where we can just tap in and say, I need this information, right? It plays a huge role. What is happening in that sphere?
Thank you very much. I think access to information, the access to information law is one of the most progressive laws that we have. It was initiated by the civil society,
yes,
by Gambia Press Union. Then we had to liaise with the civil society as a coalition of civil society on access to information, ATI. And then government embraced it. Because we knew when you don't bring those kind of things, maybe it will be part of their political agenda. But just to, we know some of these things, politicians will say we will bring these things. But we knew, it is necessary to have this law. Now we did an engagement and then brought the bill. But the government also embraced it because we cannot take the laws to the National Assembly. We don't have that mandate. And then it worked. So the law is there, though we are behind schedule in implementing the law, to be honest, because the law states that 18 months before after the enactment of
which
the law,
was in 2021, right?
2021, and 6 months after the establishment of the commission, that all the parastatals, the directorates, the ministries should submit an implementation plan to the commission. But still now, even we've seen recently when the commission also wrote a press release reminding the institutions to be complying in terms of the law to ensure that they submit their plans. But no institution has done so. So it becomes a problem. You have a law, but the implementation, what we are talking about. And there is another component in terms of proactive disclosure. You made mention of it. The government should come up with a plan to ensure that we proactively disclose the information. That is, you should not wait for others. For example, the Africa 50 agreement. That was a very controversial agreement, and still now people do not understand that agreement. They will tell you, they said you should not build a bridge 100 meters away. The minister will come and say, no. Before the people begin to understand, and then there was a mistrust to say, you see, now you are selling our country. You understand? Another issue, the Banjul Road project. Still now you cannot have a tangible agreement in terms of that. The recent, is it Alport, this port stuff? The agreement with the Turkey company, in terms of the port. You cannot see that tangible agreement. But now the access to information law is telling you have to make proactive disclosure. Whatever agreement you do on behalf of the country, you have to proactively disclose this agreement so that people will understand the everything that is transpiring, which is key, and to avoid mistrust and disinformation as well as misinformation, because now we have information disorder all over, and you cannot stop people from giving out false information. But if you do not give them the information that they need or required, then you are denying them from their right to access. So access to information is there, and anyone have the right to seek information. And now even, unfortunately, we do not have a regulation to help implement that law. Though we will commend the government in terms of what the Mansakunda is doing. I think that is one aspect of it. It is not the answer to all the information, because mostly what happened, they will come and say, yeah, we are doing this and that and that. But now we want to see the evidence in terms of documented evidence to see whether what you're saying corroborates what is the reality. So citizens should now know. I think for me, as I said, Gambians mostly, we don't explore, we don't explore certain things. This law is there to tell you have the right to ask information. But how many of us know?
But to your point with that, it's very important that you mentioned we don't explore, and maybe we are not the most proactive, but that is also something that leadership is important, and the tone of where we are as a nation, the tone of the accessibility that we have, and we've not really had that before in the Gambia. This is very new to us. The fact that we can even convene in a table like this to talk freely, just 15 years ago would not have been possible, right? And then because of that, I think that we all actors and all sectors need to take a very proactive role, those who are informed, to sensitize the people. What I have found with the access to information law is that many key leaders within key sectors who are part of the implementation and the success of that law are not aware of the law. And they're not aware of the role that they have in that law.
I agree.
So that is an issue that we face.
I agree, even permanent secretaries and directors. And you will understand that colonial mentality is still here. That perspective of, secrecy. Gambians are too secret, like they like secret, being so secret because of that colonial mentality. And we understand, for example, you still have laws, the 1920 laws, the Official Secret Act, which is telling you that you cannot divulge certain information, even public information, without having consent and the government GOs. But now this access to information has an overriding effect on that. And it means any law that is existing and deterring public officials from giving out information, that law is above those laws. So it means that you can just access information and no one can stop you. And it has consequences. I believe the commission is also working. They were established last year. Coming to this year, it's just a few months after. But I believe they will really take charge. Permanent secretaries, imagine, I was at the GPU, and when you engage these people, some of them believe that, there was a time, I think a director or permanent secretary, in one of the trainings, he said, how can you give information to your enemies, like positions, to come and, how can you give a knife to, he said that, okay, how can you give a knife to someone, empower him to come and kill you? You understand those kind of, so those kind of perceptions are still existing.
Yeah, indeed.
So how to demystify that is
civil society. And that's why I'm looking at you. Civil society plays a huge role in this. I view civil society as the bridge between the government, the information, the media, the politicians, and the people. Civil society in most nations have played a key role in making sure that the government is held accountable, the people are protected. And I feel in our setting, civil society organizations are seen very much as activists, right? They're the ones that will just complain, and they're the ones that will protest, but that's not necessarily the truth. Civil society are advocates. There's a huge difference between being an activist and an advocate. You strategically influence policy makers, you strategically influence politicians to get their buy-in to represent the people, right? And I think where you sit at the National Youth Parliament, what has your experience been with that when it comes to national development and the progress of our country overall?
Thank you very much, Aisha. I think I will speak on two capacities, as the Deputy Speaker of the Youth Parliament and also as a researcher at CRPD. And the role of civil society is very important, like you said, when it comes to policy development and national development. Civil society should be agenda setters in this country. A lot of times we allow, let me say, politicians to set the agenda and the discourse in this country. That is the role of civil society. We need to define, we need to direct what do we want to talk about as a country. And then, government follows, then media follows. And that is how the issues of people really come up and the interests of people discuss. But again, civil society should be able to get tangible voice from the people so that when we talk to stakeholders and duty bearers on behalf of people, we really represent the voice of people, not as we think as elites, but how, people feel at the local level. Over the years, at my role at the Center for Research and Policy Development, intentionally, I have shifted a lot of my programmatic actions working with the chiefs, because looking at because of what happened over the years, our political history here and there, most of us see the chiefs as political tools at some point of our political history, but that does not how will I say this? That does not take away the powers they have in their communities. And they're the custodians of peace, justice, and security in their communities. And that is why they have the tribunal courts. Mm-hmm. And that is why they still preside over those courts. And those courts still have cases. And just on Friday, I was doing a national tour. I met 14 chiefs and their alcalos and their communities talking about, because as a researcher, you confide the discuss, and I have just two questions. And, one was, do you know we are developing a constitution as a country? I want to know that first. Before I go to the National Assembly and tell them, this is what people want from the constitution, I want to know from the people first, do you know we are developing a constitution as a country? That is my first question. And two, then I explain how far we have come. And my second question is, does this process really represent your aspirations and views as the citizen of this country? If yes, how? If no, how would you have preferred it? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And my third question is, if the process continues as it is, and your views and your aspirations is not set to the point of referendum, will you vote for this constitution? Mm-hmm. And if it is changed midway, will you vote for this constitution at referendum? Mm-hmm. Or do you think we should go back to the drawing board? Mm-hmm. For me, I think this is very important. And again, you talk about the role of civil society. And coming back from the field, I should be able to tell a National Assembly member, you know what? I talk to citizens of this country. And this is how they think the process of constitution building should go when it comes to, inclusivity. And several chiefs, highlighted the fact that we are going to the second reading this month. Am I right?
Yeah.
This month, we're doing the second reading of the Constitution. And until now, chiefs don't have a copy of the draft Constitution. And most of us think it's not important. In fact, after the Constitution was placed, how will I say it?
Gazetted?
Was gazetted. One of the first people that should have a copy was the chiefs.
Local chiefs.
Was the local chiefs, because they're able to engage their communities, to talk about it at local level. And eventually the discourse will trickle up as to how we want it.
It was kidnapped by politicians.
Yes, but it's important. I think you make very important points. And you speak to,
it's okay. It's okay. And for me, I think that's what the role of civil society should be. Yeah. It's about talking to the people and knowing really what they want, and coming to the table where we represent them and say, this is what people want. And like you said, as advocate, we become guardian of the process and say, and this is how it will go.
Yes, well done. I think you really have gotten to the root of the matter, and a huge part of development, national development, from what you've all said, is the Constitution. A Constitution is the backbone of any nation. A Constitution is the identity of the nation. It shapes in which the nation is governed. It shapes in which the nation sees itself and the way it's perceived, which is key, right? And you've also spoke on some of the things that came Kemo mentioned in terms of the importance of traditional leaders, traditional governance, traditional politics, making sure that it fits into our local realities. So Kemo, as you wear two hats, being a politician, a partisan politician, but then also being a representative of a local government, what are some of the feedback or remarks that you have from the insights we've shared?
I just want to 2 points. First of all, with what MS said, especially when it came to development and local government councils, just to clarify, most of these laws are there, especially when it comes to issues of security and all of that, because the mayors are the head of security, the security council in the regions. And they have monthly briefings with, the security chiefs in the regions, and they, we collaborate on a lot of issues. But I think where we have a problem is that we have a policy deficiency in the country, or let's say the issue of laws contradicting each other. For example, it makes no sense to me that an appointed individual overrides and oversees the work of an elected individual with a mandate.
That's my point.
So, for example, how does a minister or a secretary of state have more powers to oversee and override the work of an elected individual like a mayor? When you look at the political or the elected or elective positioning in the country, after the president, the highest second elected individual in the country are the mayors and then the chairpersons. Because in the Gambia, the vice presidents are not elected, they're appointed. In the Gambia, the speaker and the deputy speaker are not elected, they're nominated. So, but in the end, our local government acts have really reduced the powers of local government councils. And for example, today, even a minister can come and dissolve a council if he feels that he has the numbers and has the powers. And this has put local government councils in a very disadvantaged position. And most of, for example, you talk about the subventions that we're supposed to have, we don't have it. Sometimes you need to get into a project and then you need the government support and government's backing. You don't get it because it's a, it's a high maintenance project. It's a very, huge project. You need sovereign guarantees, you need sovereign bonds, and government wouldn't give you that. Thirdly, for example, in our case where we are not in the same party with the government has done everything possible to see to ways that they would, cripple the work we're doing. For example, we are currently trying to work on a 30-kilometer road project within the urban centers of Gambia. We are asked to pay a 10% tax even before the project has started, which is close to $30 million because of a $300 million project. We're also asked that we need to put aside funds for compensation. And the plan we have, we don't need to, to disrupt any property, because we have been able to work on, we want to work on roads that are, very direct and don't come into infringement with anybody's, private property. So we're having problems with authorities like the NRA, like you've mentioned. And for example, we are supposed to set up a regional roads authority or a local roads authority. But you cannot do these things without the support of the National Roads Authority, and so many other things that we're faced with today. The second part that I kind of diverse with Degen is that it's not only civil society who's supposed to set the trend in our country. Anybody can set a trend, especially when it comes to conversations, and especially when it comes to what is a necessity for our people at a certain period of time. Politicians are doing what we can, and we're going to do what we can based on what we think is right, because these are issues of subjectivity. And what I find right and what I find as a priority might be different from what you find right and what you find as a priority. And this is where everybody needs to have a voice of conscience, and this is where everybody needs to have a voice that will be able to stand for the people. And for me, I think what we need to do as a country is that we cannot continue to see each other as competitions, especially when it comes to partisan politicians and civil society actors, because civil society actors, know it or not, are politicians too. They're not just partisan, but they are active in the political space of a country. And what I've realized in this country is that for the longest of times, politicians and civil society advocates are always at loggerheads, and you don't even know why. But it's just a suspicion that is there and has been there for a very long time. And if we want to really move as a country, we must be able to shift away from that. For example, know it or not, we as politicians have taken the active role of the conversation of this new constitution we have as a country. Every single week, I am at a radio station or I am at a television station talking about the constitution. But I have members of civil society also doing that. So this is where we need to collaborate. I see, Gambia Participates has a program, and there have been caravans all over the country. And I like the idea that you are also meeting chiefs. But we need to also understand that we're in a post-modernity era, where the position of information, the position of belief, and the position of respect has really transformed the position that we stand. Has really transformed where we stand as a people today. You know, for example, today before listening to a chief, for example, or today before listening to an imam for information, I might just go online and check what does this thing say. You know, so this has provided a new generation is being born in the country where, in as much as traditional chiefs are important, but the people in their houses are more important. And there's also another gap. Generally, as a holistic, when you look at it from a holistic point of view, there are gaps in every aspect of governance in the country where we are detached as governors from the people that we represent. I've seen, for example, even in traditional political systems where people don't listen to traditional leaders anymore. And it's the same for local government. It's the same for central government. And when we talk about civil society, I think you guys have a very active role, and we need to play as partners. Because in as much as you advocate for something, without us politicians moving it in the parliament, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Like it or not. You can advocate, you can push whatever. For example, with the 2020 draft. I mean, I saw where civil society members were calling members of parliament and other things. But at that point, political parties had already held their position. And nothing was going to change that. Because in fact, there's that animosity between political parties and civil society groups. In fact, we had in the House where members of parliament were saying that, you know, these people are being funded by the West. These people are being, you know, being influenced by dollars coming in from here and there, and then they want us to do this and that. So I believe what we need to do as a country is we need to sit at a table and realize that we're partners and realize that this country is ours and everybody has a role they need to play. Politicians will play their role, civil society members will play their role, and everybody has their position. But this needs to be done once we have very strong institutions that will back the work we're doing.
Yeah, for me, I just want to come on board. For me, I don't think local councils need subvention from government. Local councils should have their
All over the world.
Just allow me, please. But now it's not working. So now, are you going to change that system?
But
because it is
collecting local
when
councils.
No, allow me. I just want to please.
No, I need to understand where you're
just
coming
allow
from.
me.
Yes, can I ask a question, please?
Just allow me.
No, you've said something. I just want to ask a
Allow
question.
me.
I want to know, why do you think local governments?
That's what I'm coming to say.
Okay.
Allow me. If local government is giving their own autonomy to decide where they get their monies from, not the central government dictating them who to appoint, where to get their funds and stuff, they will be independent of their own and then they can work together with government. Now you are expecting subvention from government and it is not coming, and it has not been coming for so long, and people have been complaining about this for ages, since Jammeh's time to now, and even they have also restricted local government to diverted, let me put it that way, diverted some of the revenues that local councils were collecting, and also local councils need reforms, because we've seen also the mismanagement of funds at the local council level, as well as the capacities, because if you look at, I was listening to one of the engagement with local, at the commission, and the guy, they asked him about procurement. He said he has a 1 week certificate and he's doing major procurement, and he was asked certain questions and he cannot answer. Imagine the types of procurement we have, the laws. He cannot answer. I was like, wow, this guy is involved in major procurement issues and processes. How can you not understand these processes and the laws? And you are there, and you are a senior person there. So for me, I believe it's important, one, we have to reform our institutions. And then local government, these people are elected representatives and they are respected. They should decide housing tax, where to get their tax, the road tax. They should have their share of the cake. NAVEC should pay them. All these poles that they are building around is within their jurisdiction. They should also determine the land. The lands, not government to determine the prime lands, all the prime are giving it to ministers and others. How about the local government councils for their development? For me, subvention should be scrapped, and then these people should be strengthened and make sure that they determine what to get and then how to execute it. Another issue in terms of the constitutional building. For me, I believe, yes, politicians are important, but sometimes they take a stand that is so rigid and restrictive. They don't want to even negotiate and consult. So even if you engage them, sometimes you engage them, sometimes you even invite them to discuss, to a discussion. What they will do is they will, to a serious discussion, I mean, with civil society, and I've encountered it. What they will do is they will just send anybody. If you tell them, what is your position of the party, they don't even know. You understand? You cannot send a junior person to a serious discussion on a national discussion. You just send, he's not even a local government, a party representative at the ward level, and you say, just go there, just to represent our party at a serious discussion. So this country, every sector should be serious about this discussion. This constitutional deadlock, if you see it, to be honest, is politicians. Politicians are the ones that can, pave the way. Yes, you can say no to the constitution, but I believe even with the NPP, if they are serious about this constitution, we can do amendments at committee level. I know the fear is because everybody is, indebted to their political stance, and they are not willing to compromise.
And also, MS, when it comes to the discuss,
yes,
before you go on, please, MS said something about local government councils. I've been quiet a little bit. I find it contradictory, MS, when you say that the subventions need to be scrapped, but also you talk about the restrictions that we have today, especially when it comes to getting our finance.
What is the contradiction?
Yes, that is why I was asking. Because when you say that subventions need to be scrapped,
yes,
you haven't given any justifiable reason why you think subventions need to be scrapped.
I've already given you.
No, but that is what I've
already given you.
Can I finish?
Yeah.
I listened to you.
Yeah.
So because that is what I find contradictory. Because the reasons you have given, personally, to me, do not justify why they need, because you have made mention how financings have been taken away from us. So
if you get those financing for yourself,
I think we are kind of saying the same thing. So I think from MS,
that's what I'm saying.
Let me finish.
It should not be taken away from you. That's what I'm saying.
So I think that we are all saying the same thing.
No, I don't think we're saying the same thing.
Okay,
yes,
so
let me finish my point.
Subventions, MS is saying that the subventions is something that the government is not going to be able to allocate. We even see it in our national budget now. We're looking at even the context that we're in. Exactly. I think what the conversation that we should be having at the local government level should be directed towards how do you get revenues from what you should be entitled to, instead of relying on subventions, which many governments are also doing.
This is why I said, when I finish, you might get what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying here is that just because people are not doing what they're supposed to do, doesn't mean that we need not ask for it. That's one. Two, subventions from local government. The laws we have in this country today, for example, garages were collected by local government councils. In the past government, what they did was they took that away from the councils and gave it to GRA. Fuel pumping prices, the tax was supposed to come through the local government councils. What was done with that? It was taken away from local government councils and given to GRA. Now, for example, the street lights were paid to government, to local government councils. What was done? It was taken away from us. So what I'm trying to say here is that even whereas these things are being done all over the world, and this is for best practice, because, for example, you cannot also have a fully autonomous local government council. It happens nowhere in the world because they're still under the jurisdiction of the central government, because it's not a government of its own, in my opinion. Oh, no, not in my opinion, but generally, because you need to be answerable to someone. So there needs to be a certain position of control, and there needs to be a certain position of accountability. This is where the subventions come in, because the developments that are being done in the local government councils reflect to national development, because in a nutshell, it's developing the country. So this is why even the subvention, I think people misunderstand or do not understand when we talk about subvention of local government councils. Local government council subventions are from the development budget of each local government. That is where 30% needs to be paid for by the central government, because it's the development of the country. Now, there are also ways of how do you get this subvention, because you need to submit your budget at this certain period of time. You need to do this, you need to do that and that. So this is what will regulate it. Now, what you're saying here makes sense, and I do agree that because we have not been able to get these subventions, maybe we need to work on laws that will empower us to for example, make our own or have our own finances. We're already doing that, and I can tell you that this is where compliance also comes in for citizens. You ask a lot of people here, how many of people pay our rates? How many of people pay taxes to our councils? For example, the revenues, you talk about the markets, you talk about market taxes, you talk about our house taxes, council taxes. Majority of Gambians don't. For example, in my constituency of Bakau owes KMC over $30 million. And it's the same for a lot of other constituencies around the region of Kanifing. So even if we ask for these laws, the laws are not the problem. It's the implementation. While as I do agree that with the Local Government Act, there needs to be a lot of reforms. And it's across the board, everywhere. But again, it's about how do we implement these laws. So that was what I wanted to clarify. Two, when it comes to the issue of the Constitution, this is not an issue of politicians. This is why even in a program I had last time, I said this is not a Dabo versus Barrow issue. This is an issue about the people. But again, the people are detached from the process. And this is why I liked what Ndegen said, that when she went on her tour, it was difficult for even people to understand what was going on. So until we center the people that matter, until we make sure that the citizens are taking an active role, politicians, don't forget, we are also citizens. And we are going to take an active role in this constitutional process.
Every politician will say we are doing in the interest of the public.
No, can I finish? But this is where it becomes problematic, because you cannot determine what we are doing for or against the people. Because everybody, when we talk about politics, it's a very subjective issue. And I keep telling people, even, for example, Yahya Jammeh, to some extent, thought he was doing the best for the country.
Exactly.
Point. I believe what I am doing is for the best interest of the country.
And I think that that's also what speaks to the importance of just having a very clear idea of what is best for the country. That is what is best for us nationally, as we've talked about the nation state. And then also to talk about the subvention conversation, a lot of countries have actually stepped away from subventions. We've talked about Singapore. Singapore is looked at as an ideal model of how an underdeveloped country has become extremely developed and better than what we call the developed countries of today. And they've actually stepped away from subventions and gone more towards local municipalities, empowering themselves, self-reliance.
That is what I was talking about.
Yes,
I'm not saying for me.
One minute. I think context is important.
No, but I gave you a context. You don't just want to understand.
Of where he's coming from. I get where you're both coming from. But if we take all of that and we have this inclusive dialogue and we look at in the context of the Gambia, given the current state of our nation, given the current state of our physical state, even financially, are we able to allocate that? Is that the priority? Whilst maybe shifting the power dynamics where the local governments and councils can now take the revenue, as you've mentioned, the important things, because it's not happening. It should go to the pockets of the local government. I think that's where the conversation should be. I think that's where we can advocate towards. I think it's easier in my position for us to get influence to advocate towards reforms that are looking at that.
He even made mention of something.
The pumps for the forward, all of these things, the NAWEC, these are very important things that local governments should be getting revenue from that.
Exactly.
There should be regulations in place that local governments are not completely autonomous and they're not completely not guided by the executive, because that collaboration has to be there, because that's what connects it, it makes us a state and not independent nations. So I think that's really where we can have the conversation. I know you have a lot more to say.
Quick one, just a quick one. For me, look, when I went to Kenya, Nairobi, our driver, one of, when we were going around town, and we went to the market, and then we asked him to park. We are used to menu fee new watcher, and he said no. If I park here, guys, the local council will fine me, spot fining. Can't you do that? Allow me.
This is why I'm saying that. The point is that we are mistaking. Because, for example, when we talk about local government councils,
just allow me.
No, because you asked me a
just allow me. No, just allow me. Just allow me.
Because
you said I made a contradiction.
Why are you allowing this gentleman?
Just allow me. Just allow me. And another thing is, you made mention of you guys, being powerful, but you are powerless in terms of certain implementation. For example, your road projects. For me, I'm in line with that. for you to decide how can you do, what kind of development are you going to do without the government trying to restrict you. You have to do this, you have to do that. I know you are subjected to the National Assembly review. You should not have an absolute power, of doing anything without reporting to the National Assembly. So you are reporting to the National Assembly. What is wrong with that?
You know, the mistake we do in the country is
Yes.
when we talk about local government, we're thinking of Banjul, KMC, and Brekama.
No, it's far beyond that.
You are talking about a councils, for example, in Kuntaur, that don't even make $600,000 from taxes a year.
Yeah.
So if you say that you're this is why I said context is important. Because you cannot tell me Nairobi councillors get $6,000 a month. I have a friend who is head of the county association of young councillors in Kenya. They get $6,000 a month because Nairobi is that affluent to able to afford that. You are talking about Kuntaur, for example, that can't make even $600,000.
So you think they cannot make that if they expand their revenue base?
How do you expand
A lot.
Can I finish?
lot.
How do you expand a revenue base where the only source of revenue they have is lumos? We have to realize that the reality is
They don't have lands. They cannot venture into other things.
What I'm trying to say is
we
the
are
reality.
I think that this
We are trying
conversation
to
is very
train.
I think
cannot create
a
utopia.
No, we
Aisha.
cannot
No, there's
create
nothing
it
like
in 1
that.
minute.
Aisha.
We will just shift the conversation
Nothing
from this,
like
but we can definitely not create an utopia. And I think that everything that is being mentioned is very important because we do not, the four of us, have the solutions to
Exactly.
Gambia's problem.
Exactly.
But they're very important to have these discussions to see the different
Definitely.
perspectives because they're all driving us towards the national development, inclusive dialogue. We all have the same goal, and you spoke about this a lot during the interview,
Yes.
where we all have different goals, we all have the same direction that we want to go to, but we can do it in our own respective ways, have dialogues, and learn from each other as we go along.
Can I
I'll give the
conclude on my
mic
points?
to
Thank
again to
Thank
finish
you,
where she was.
finally.
Yes.
So I want to go back to the constitution
Okay.
and come back to institutions, picking from one of Kemo's point. And still, while I was doing the tour, I met young people that talk about something very central, and that is when we are having the constitutional discourse, can we move away? Yes, it is very important. They accept it is important, but can we expand the conversation beyond term limits?
Exactly.
Beyond appointments.
Exactly.
A young person tells me, when you start this discussion, can you tell me what my rights are as a Gambian citizen?
Exactly.
What are my responsibilities towards this country? And how can I harness the partnerships and, of stakeholders and my fellow young people in my community to ensure that we have a way to contribute to the national development? And for me, this becomes very central. And I think it's a lesson to learn from 2020, about the 2020 draft constitution. For me, this time when we go into the communities to talk about the constitution, let's expand the conversation beyond term limits, beyond, who appoints who and what is their roles and responsibilities. It should be citizen-centric. Let's tell citizens
Let's center the people
why
that
they need to have a constitution. How is that important to their economic development? How is that important to their social development? And how is that important to their political development? And I will just connect this. Kemo talks about how, the influence of chief have really reduced over the years because of individualism and centrality of the person, having access to things directly without necessarily going through those local institutions. And for me, these local institutions are very important because they become a point of political mobilization. And that is why we need to go back. For example, our Chieftaincy Act is a 1963 act. Can you imagine? Before
Colonial.
constitution, before independence. So we need to go back, look at review these laws and make them, make these institutions suit our current realities. And if necessary, adjust their responsibilities for them to respond to the needs of their citizens at local level at that point. So for me, this should be the conversation. And when we're talking about constitution and wanting to trickle, the conversation down from, national level to the to the local level, for me, it should go through these institutions. We should engage the local government councils, we engage the chiefs, we engage the alcalos, we engage the
Women
ward
leaders.
representatives. usually we talk about these demographics, youth, women, but when you go to these communities, after the alcalos, from every ward you have, usually in some communities, you have a male and female from every ward that represent the ward to the village development committees. So if you trickle down issues that way, at the end of the day, you will see every citizen have participated. And we will not necessarily pull all these resources that we usually waste in ensuring that we have these conversations. And for me, these are very important
You
things.
make excellent point. And what I love about your points is that everybody is nodding. And the fact that everybody is nodding, it really just speaks to the fact that besides the sectors, or regardless of the sectors that we come from, there still can be agreement on how we see national development and how we should do it. And I think that the ethos of what we're all saying is that it should come from the people. It should be represented by the people. When I was in the Gambia, Kemo knows this story very well, is how I met him. I was doing my thesis and I was looking at the role of local government when it comes to development. And one of the things that I found was the fact that we do not consult as we need to. When civil society has any project in KMC, they should actually go through the municipality. And the municipality should be able to have a dashboard of the activities that are happening, the programs that are happening, whether it's youth, whether it's women empowerment, PWDs, so that they can avoid duplicates of efforts, right? For a long time, we've had donors, external factors, who have come in and taken that role to be the local council in a sense. And I mean this in a way in which they have been setting the tone to an extent. We talk a lot about local-led development, and it might be, it might be unintentional, but are the local actors? For local-led development, the municipalities are key. All activities that happen, the local actors, whether it's even in Kuntaur you spoke about. We have activities in Kuntaur. Even the most remote areas of the Gambia, there are local governments there, and there are activities and programs that are happening in those regions. But are the local actors, in terms of the local leaders, aware of what these activities mean? And that's why now when we finish the activities and we come to validate and we sit in our rooms and we go to them, this is what you have to do. They will say, what is this? We don't know what it is. We were never a part of it. And development is about, what did we say? It reflects the state of the people, the state of the people politically, socially, and then also economically, but also the state of mind. Are they informed? Are they aware of the process? We saw this during the FGM. That we cannot go into that conversation. We won't have the time for that. But again, it's really about sensitizing the people and understanding what the people actually need.
Absolutely.
As we are rounding off, there's one thing that I want us to speak of, which is the fact that sensitization is important. The Constitution is the backbone of our country, and to be able to mobilize from political parties, from the media, from civil society, we need funding to do that. It takes resources, and we've seen that resources are scarce. There's almost to none in the civic spaces now due to the US and foreign aid shifts. How can we as a nation mitigate for that? How can we come in to support civic spaces who are doing the good work of mobilizing the people and informing the people when we have this huge funding gap? And what can we do in the future to really be self-reliant as a nation? One thing that I will bring up is the fact that in the Gambia, we have a diaspora. We have a diaspora who plays a huge role to all of those three things we said. Socially, economically, and politically. They play a huge role. They send a lot of remittance to our country, and the remittance play a huge role in our GDP. How can we now, perhaps as a country, harness that money and those resources that are being sending into our country towards local development that is not centralized through the government, that it's not from the local councils, but it's actually from the people, because they're also the people. I am someone that is born and raised in the diaspora who's currently now living in the Gambia, but very much invested in the Gambian discourse and very much a Gambian from, like, you ask me, where are you from? I am from the Gambia, Maybe those are the first English words that I learned. But what role does the diaspora play in this? And also, what are the effects of the US foreign aid freeze?
Thank you very much, Aisha. Like you said, as always, when it comes to politics, when it comes to the economy specifically, the diaspora has been a huge contributor in shaping discourse, but also in maintaining our economy. And for me, it's time, all of it, it's time you jox leen seen cër.
Wow.
And before we ask for more, we should first jox them their cër.
Exactly. Allow them to vote.
And politically, they have been asking for the right to vote forever. and which has not materialized over the years. And I think as a country, it's time we are serious about this discourse and see how do we include them in what we do in real essence. And the other thing is, we have seen, especially in 2016 towards 2018, the diaspora did a lot of contribution when it comes to our our political mobilization, both for political parties and civil society. We have seen, how they supported the protest, the process, our political process over the years. I think we can still, bank on the same strategy to ensure that they also invest in our civic space to ensure that there is sustainability when it comes to serving our people in what we do. But secondly, recently, I know Setmat is going to kill me. At CRPD specifically, as we develop our strategy looking into these challenges, because like you said, US have withdrawn. Europe might fully withdraw at some point.
It's a matter of time.
Exactly. Will we stop serving our people? No. So what we're thinking about and what we have started doing is, expanding the institution, beyond it being a civil society and, having a component, because we do consultancy, sometimes at individual level, sometimes for the organization. How do we leverage on this to make sure we have a consultancy aspect of the institution
to create revenue,
but also because we also do training, to have a training component of the institution to also build revenue, so that we are able to continue training government and civil society, but also we are able to get revenue to sustain our advocacy efforts that we are doing for the institution. And while we are able to continue doing research for our clients that we normally do research for, but also do research to inform policies of this country. And that is one of our sustainability strategy that we have already, started doing, is about how do we channel it towards now, instead of again being high individual consultant. How do we channel
our efforts?
Exactly, channel it to the institution to ensure sustainability. And I think this is one thing that all civil society organizations should start looking into.
Thank you. I think you make very good points. It's about really financial diversification, right? We need to diversify the way in which we're getting funding. It's not to say that we can't get funding from donors, but it's to say that even which those relationships work in terms of the compliance and the reporting, and do we actually really have autonomy? Do we really in reality need to go through a field office of an INGO to help us implement our activities? Not necessarily. We have in the Gambia civil society organizations and institutions, whether we even go through local municipalities who help us with those operational and administrative costs, so that we get more in as a nation overall. So you bring in some very good points. Mr. Bojang, do you have anything to add on this?
I think this is where countries having plans come in again. For example, if we ask what is Gambia's foreign policy outlook, is a question that is very important now. And also I think we have been talking about moving away from funding and aids and grants for a very long time as a continent, but we have never really taken, the step. So for me, I see this as an opportunity in as much as a challenge. But I mean, every challenge produces an opportunity, and we must redefine what it means to be an independent country, and we must redefine what it means to take care of ourselves. And you look at the conversations we've been having about these things, and you realize that, for example, in as much as it has an impact, for example, you talk about Nigeria with its HIV/AIDS, funding programs from the USAID.
South Africa,
South Africa also. You talk about
Sudan,
even Gambia with its malaria and polio, initiative. But you
transitional justice too.
Yes, you realize that the people again are very detached, because most people didn't know that these fundings were coming into our countries until when it was halted. So it also creates another position where we really need to understand governance again, and how the people need to be centered. But generally also, I think, civil societies need to, like you mentioned, look at ways of advocating without, depending so much on the West. And this is where I believe that most of the time the suspicion, especially between civil societies and people, comes in. because this notion that they're being funded by the West, they are being funded by Western governments, or they're pushing the agenda of the West, this is where the conversations come from. Personally, all of us in this room has, in one way or the other, benefited. So it's not just about the funding coming in, but it's about the human development also. And again, you have mentioned about the diaspora. The diaspora makes up almost 43 to 48% of the country's GDP. And our party, for example, the United Democratic Party's main support base is from the diaspora. All our funding comes from the diaspora. But again, do we have a diaspora project where we're looking at partnering SMEs in the Gambia with diaspora investors, for example? Because it's one thing to always bring in remittance, because it's a remittance-based economy. The groundnut industry is not working anymore. The tourism industry is almost dead and collapsed. So have we really thought of making sure that our diaspora, does GAIPA, for example, have a desk? I know they do have a desk for diaspora investments, but how complex is it, and how can we simplify that one person can sit in America, for example, or England and say that, you know what, I think I need to invest in the Gambia. You know, that GAIPA has a directory of all SMEs in the Gambia who are making, progress and need investors, and they link them. I am not very sure of how it's gonna work when the civil society, how civil societies are gonna go forward. But I think it's an opportunity to redirect, and also for countries, small economies like Gambia, to reinvent the wheel. For example, move away from cash crops, for example. Yes, we've been farming groundnut for God knows when. It's almost 120 years since we started farming groundnut. What benefits has it brought us? You look at investments, even foreign direct investments. And you've made mention of something. You said that now that the USAID has the US government, even though there's a halt in the courts for the pullout, but we have seen a rise of populist movements also all over the world, especially in Europe. The German elections just happened 2 weeks ago, and we saw how the Nazi party, the Nazi party gained a lot of support. In Italy, is the same thing. The prime minister is a populist, is a nationalist. A lot of nationalist movements are, rising up in Europe. First, it was fighting against immigrants. It's gonna get to a point they're going to also stop funding coming into our countries. And are we prepared? This is why, again, I talked about the foreign policy that our countries have. We need to start, redirecting our energies. We need to start producing, and we need to be competitive in the global market. And until we can do that, it's going to be difficult for us to compete.
And I mean, you make a good point on it's going to stop. And the reality is, I think a lot of people in our context do not grasp the effects and impacts that this is going to have in all sectors. I mean, the private sector, from the government, but also civic spaces. We're going to see the effects of it, and it also presents us with an opportunity because the wheel is being reinvented. We've talked about how the power dynamics between the global north and the global south have been really questionable. They've put us in a position where we are vulnerable and where we're weak. And now that it's collapsed, we are of course going to, face the immediate side effects of it, but now how do we as a nation look at the long term to really build resilience, as you've mentioned, and other countries are really taking that opportunity. And I think for civil society, for the government out there, we need to document, number one. I mean, I found it very difficult to even gather data about how much funding has come into the country from USAID, right? We should have all of this information, so when something like this happens, we can already anticipate the impact. But right now we can't. We're scrambling to understand what the impact of it will be. If we could anticipate it, we will be more resilient in the sense that we know what we're dealing with and we will know how we can mitigate. So you make some good points, and I love your point about GAIPA's role in this, the point about the diaspora actually harnessing their investments in the country in a way in which it can boost national development, but also, to your point, give them the respect, give them that voice, give them that identity, so they also feel like they are Gambians. You said tourism is dead. Tourism is dead in the sense of traditional tourism, of how we viewed it. The tourist is a diaspora. They go to the restaurant, they're going to the the apartments. They're our audience, and they're huge because they're having kids. Man amna sumaya amna man amna dorm, and it goes on. So they're the new target. So for us as a nation, we're very small, but we have this unique superpower and ability, given our small size, but given the resources that we have, given the resources that we have, but given the capacity that we have also. And it's about harnessing that. I will allow you to give some concluding remarks.
totally concur with my people. First is not only to expand our revenue base, but to cut cost. Just recently, we had the Minister of Information, because people were saying they spent 150 million, and then the minister clarified that it's 100 million. That was the target on independence celebration. Why are we celebrating independence? Why are we using 100 million to celebrate independence? That money would have been, kept somewhere or diverted to some other priorities. We need to have fiscal discipline in terms of even the fleet of cars that follows the president. Can't we cut that because of the realities? Can't we reduce some of these celebrations we are talking about? Can we look into more program-based budgeting than just the normal cycle of budgeting, cut and paste and stuff? We look at our travel expenses. Can't we cut that as well? We look into those kind of things and then divert those funds. Diaspora, key player. Imagine they are pumping, over $51 billion into our GDP, which is huge, which is even beyond our GLF, which is the local fund, government local fund that we are collecting. Is beyond our taxes, beyond everything. And countries now are moving from just having those things like, the diaspora is giving remittance, to even by extension having diaspora bonds, rather than, having bonds with other international organizations. Why not your own people?
Yeah, because it even surpasses what the diaspora brings in, surpasses foreign aid.
Of
So when we look
course,
at that in
of
reality,
course.
and then we also see that the diaspora, a lot of the frustration that they articulate is the fact that we're in this constant chain of, we're sending money and we're not seeing anything change.
Exactly.
So what role do they also play in stopping that dependency culture and entitlement culture? We should be a meritocracy, right?
They should have a functioning diaspora directorate,
Yes.
not just to say Ministry of Foreign Affairs and External Matters, blah blah blah. You should have it functioning, a directorate. For me, even myself, I was thinking, I don't know how crazy is that. They should even have representatives at the National Assembly.
I agree.
As a member of parliament, a diaspora member of parliament, they should have that. Diaspora should be at the center of policy making. We should not just say, they are important component, blah, 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 but we have to act.
Yes.
And then make sure that they are in strategic positions.
Yeah.
Even harnessing, for example, our laws are, deterring others from being ministers. For example, you cannot be a minister as of now. You have the capacity. And other people who can be ministers in this country, maybe president, we can say, okay, but minister, someone who have experience, expertise, and also even the investment aspect of it. So we have to change our laws. We have to strengthen our institutions. We have to make sure that diaspora is included in our day-to-day dealings so that we can harness the opportunity. We wouldn't even need, there's a difference between dependency and partnership. And for us as Gambia, we are dependent. We are not partnering. They will say, our development partners. They are our donor partners, not our development partners. Because obviously we are depending on these people. So now why can't we really look inwards and ensure that, all our development and agenda will be harnessed? For example, lastly, our transitional justice. The minister says we need $60 million sort of to implement it. And now some of these monies are coming from USAID. And now what is going to happen? Are we going to halt the process? And when this thing came, Ghana, they documented, I agree with you, Ghana, they did a review. Automatically they did a documentation and say, this is the gap, $151 million. That's the gap. How can we fix the gap? But still now, I didn't hear the government, unless Madam Degen Okemo had the government saying this is the overall impact that is going to have on our economy, on our processes and programs. So I believe we need to document, and then also we need to ensure that diaspora is part of the system, not just say they are important, but they have to be part of this so that we can tap into those opportunities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I am working on that, and
yes,
I will depend on. I will want your expertise.
Yes.
So actually,
Okay.
we have an insight of when it comes to civil society.
Okay.
I
mean the government over.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
But when it comes to the government and other aspects of the country, really, we have not yet got that data. But it's something I'm invested in
I know.
and working on.
Yes, and then I think, to that, we are, I mean, when you look at USAID funding being put into the Gambia, we don't need to look very way back because it's actually quite recent. When you look at the significant, funding that we've had from development partners, it's only maybe 2017, 18 upwards to date. So it's not impossible. I'm sure even the four of us sat here, if we really wanted to, in a room for 1 week, we would be able to get somehow somewhat of an idea. But I'm going to bring this conversation to a close. I thank you very much for coming in. I've really enjoyed the conversation. We've really had an opportunity to touch on many of the issues that we're facing in our nation, but then also looking at some of the solutions that we have. And the nice thing that I like about it is that the solutions are within us and the audience and everybody else. So I thank you very much for your time and for coming during Ramadan. Have a lovely day. Thank you.
Thank you.